Okay, you came back. Nice to see you again. Following on from yesterday's chat on what the Bible is and how do we read it, today I just want to talk a little bit about the power of a story. We may not be aware of it, but I think most of us are living with a sense of a storyline. We all imagine that we came from somewhere and our lives have some sort of purpose because of the story that we understand we're in. So most cultures have slightly different stories. We would sometimes call it a worldview, how the world works. So so two big questions that kind of shape our worldview. Number one is, where did I come from? And number two, why am I here now? Those two related questions. So we come from like I say, from the UK, which is quite a Western context, and so we'll have a certain kind of Western worldview that we were brought up with. So,
but you don't really know your own worldview.
No.
Unless you meet people with other worldviews, do you?
No, that's right, yeah. With a different story.
You think everyone's the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously you think that your one, that you've been brought up with, is the correct one. Eh? So
the most normal.
Yeah, the most normal. So let's just give an example from the Western viewpoint. Where were we taught we came from? What were the main stories in the media? You know, the majority of people's thinking, what would they say?
Probably the Big Bang.
Right.
The evolution, would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, so, you know, I was very much taught this. We were formed, you know, in billions of years ago as little microbes that somehow managed to then change, and through countless millions of years and little tiny changes, different animals came about, and ultimately human beings. So we are here purely by accident. Really, it was by chance, by a mixture of gases and temperatures and, you know, all the right conditions that made life possible and somehow produced self-conscious beings. Humanity, you know, which when I talk about this in in an Eastern context, people are quite surprised. They think this is crazy.
Yeah, you need a lot of faith to believe
You
that.
do, yeah. But that is how most people would think, that's where they originate from. It's, you know, that humanity came out of a series of amazing accidents just by chance. So that actually has quite a big implication on then the second question, which is, well, what am I here for?
Well, it's all just very meaningless, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Life's what you make it, and then you die.
Yeah, exactly that. There's no real purpose, there's no meaning, you know, so some person decides to do this with their life, some person does this, but, you know, give you 70 or 80 years and, you know, you're dead, and that's it, finished. So it's quite a dark worldview, really. But that leads us actually to say, well, if there is no purpose, then it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you are fulfilled. It's about your personal fulfillment. And, you know, so the Western worldview, the story is about the individual being a hero. You know, you are the hero. You are the hero of your story. You've got to make your way, and all your, you know, dreams and aspirations need to be fulfilled. You've got this one life to do it, so don't waste it. Yeah. And that's the Western story, isn't it? You know, trying to make it good. You know, from rags to riches and all that kind of thing. And you'll see that in our films. Lots of the Western films reflect that, you know, kind of, you know, starting off very, you know, normally and then achieving something amazing, either through a wonderful relationship or through a great adventure or through getting superpowers and finding a way to be significant in the world. That's our Western worldview. Yeah. And that's the story that we've lived with, in a sense. You know, that's in the back of our minds, this is what life is all about. This is how to make sense of the world and our place in it. So it's really important, this. I know some of you are thinking, what on earth does this have to do with the Bible? But actually it does have quite a lot. Because even, for you, if you're living in a different culture, you'll have your own story. Any ideas about an African worldview?
Well, I know it's a lot more about us together, isn't it? And I'm just sitting here thinking that's why we need each other, isn't it? And that's why we like knowing you guys, and you can help us to understand the world better, and we can help you understand the world better. So that's why God invented the church, I think.
Yeah, we do. We need each other.
Yeah.
Sure.
But no, I don't know the African worldview
No.
particularly well.
I remember, I don't either. I find it fascinating when we do get into those conversations. I remember talking about this at one point and explaining the Western kind of, this is where we originate from in our minds and how it affects our lives. And I said to a lady, I think she was a Xhosa, and she didn't tell me where they originate from, as humanity. She told me the story of their original ancestor.
Yeah.
And and out from that one ancestor came the Xhosa people. Even when I asked her, where do you originate from, she didn't think about herself as an individual. She thought about herself as a group of people.
Ubuntu,
yeah. That's good. But she existed in that community, and so a lot more about purpose and the reason for living came from her community, and a sense of doing right and doing wrong was all judged by the standards of the community and the honour that was given in the community. That's what the purpose she had.
I mean, there's really great things about that, isn't there?
Yeah,
and then there's quite tricky things as well.
Yeah.
Same as our world.
Yeah.
There's lots of good things and lots of bad things.
Yeah. So we have different worldviews in different cultures across the world.
So what has that got to do with this, Colin? Tell us.
Well, I want people to understand that the story we live with has a very powerful effect on the decisions that we make and actually our behaviour, what we do with our lives. A silly example was me learning to play golf. My dad took me to play golf, and I kind of, I was playing football at the time, and I didn't think that golf was a very attractive sport to play. And it was full of old men wandering around in silly outfits. And my dad said to me, this may not be your cup of tea, we would say. This may not be your thing. But I've found that this is a great way to get up in business. That this is where you'll meet businessmen, especially if you can play well, then they're very happy for you to play with them. And once you start playing with these businessmen, then you start to make deals with them. And it's the way forward in business.
Oh.
And that was the reason for the countless hours, the huge expense of belonging to a golf club and all the time it took to learn this game. It's a really difficult game and really frustrating. And actually I never did learn it because I didn't have my story didn't include becoming a great businessman and advancing myself through business. That wasn't part of my story at the time. I recently become a Christian and I thought, no, that's not my thing. I'm not going to do that. So, my story started to change. His story was very much, if you want to succeed in life, then, get on well in business, make yourself good money, do whatever you want after that. And, that was how it was with him. I'm just trying to say, the story that you live in has very powerful implications to your behaviour in the world. And why is that important?
Why, Colin? Why?
I thought you might ask. Because the Bible presents itself as a story.
Yeah.
And it's not just a story that we read on pages. It's actually a story where you are invited to participate. And so that's the story that you read in the Bible can become your story. And in fact, if you're preaching or teaching the Bible, one of your main goals is to help people to see this story to be their story. Much more, it's about replacing their worldview, their story that they've grown up with, and giving them a better story, the story of the Bible, and showing them that they belong in this story. And once they do, once they understand, this is my story, this is where I fit, then it's incredibly powerful at shaping your world and your life. We sometimes as church leaders get quite frustrated with the people in our congregations. We preach our hearts out, some really fantastic message. We see people putting their hands up and responding, saying, that they want to follow Jesus. And yet, a year, 2 years later, they're still living in their mess, in their sin, in their destructive relationships. They're still, addicted to what they were before. And I don't know about you, but I want to know why. It's frustrating for me as a church leader. I want to teach them how to live. But the truth is, they're still living with their old stories. That's almost always what it is. That they haven't found a way to replace their old story and put a new story in their lives. The story of the Bible, the story that they can be part of something much better. And actually, once you start to see yourself in this story, it can change the way that you live and the decisions that you make.
Okay.
That's why this is important. And that's why when we start to teach the Bible, we must teach it with that in mind. How do I help others to come and be part of this story? So, have a think about this. For a start, the question that you're to look at after this session is to do with your own worldview. Ask yourself, what is the worldview, the story that you've been brought up with, and how has that affected you? And it'd be useful to then discuss it in our group. So we're going to have a group chat, and we're going to share all our different worldviews. And
it's interesting to hear other people's.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing, really, that we get a chance to interact with people from lots of different cultures and see where are our origins and how has that affected our purpose in life. And then, we're going to go on in our next sessions to start talking about the biblical story. So that's when things get exciting. Okay, so go well, friends, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye. Okay, here's our 30-second summary for the second session. First of all, we have talked about worldview over this session. We've talked about where do we come from. We've talked about why are we here. And then thirdly, how our story is a very powerful motivation behind much of our thinking and our behaviour. And then fourthly and finally, the biblical story invites you to participate in it, and this biblical story is a much better and more powerful story than the one that most people find themselves in as they grow up. Bye for now.